Right now, in 2026, the global economy is staring down the barrel of a loaded gun, and that gun is pointed directly at the Strait of Hormuz, with the United States Navy actively engaging Iranian forces, intercepting drone swarms, and launching retaliatory airstrikes. The tension in the Persian Gulf has reached an absolute terrifying boiling point. The world is watching this narrow, 21-mile-wide waterway with unparalleled anxiety, knowing that tens of millions of barrels of oil and a massive portion of the world's liquefied natural gas must squeeze through this exact choke point every single day. But if you look at a map of the region, a very simple, incredibly logical question immediately comes to mind. The Strait of Hormuz has two banks. Iran controls the northern coast, but the southern coast belongs entirely to the Sultanate of Oman and the United Arab Emirates. If the northern coast is a heavily militarized hostile war zone in 2026, why do the massive multi-million-dollar commercial oil tankers and US Navy escorts sail so incredibly close to Iran? Why don't they simply steer their ships a few dozen miles to the south, hug the friendly coastlines of the UAE and Oman, and bypass the Iranian threat entirely? Geometrically, on a flat paper map, that solution looks absolutely perfect, but the ocean is not a flat piece of paper. Welcome back to US Geography. Today we are going to look beneath the surface of the water to understand why the map is deceiving you. We are going to explore the hidden underwater topography, the brutal reality of maritime law, and why the physical geography of the seabed forces the entire world to sail directly into Iran's crosshairs. The absolute first mistake most people make when looking at the Strait of Hormuz is assuming that the ocean is a vast open field where a ship can sail wherever it pleases. They imagine a commercial shipping captain driving a supertanker like a car on a highway, simply deciding to change lanes and move as far away from the dangerous side of the road as possible. In reality, commercial maritime traffic, especially in one of the most highly congested, dangerous choke points on the planet, does not work like that at all. The global oceans are strictly regulated by international maritime organizations, which establish rigid, invisible highways on the water known as traffic separation schemes, TSS, because the Strait of Hormuz sees hundreds of colossal ships passing through every single day. It is highly regulated to prevent catastrophic collisions. The waterway is divided into incredibly specific, strict lanes of movement. One distinct lane for ships entering the Persian Gulf, and one distinct lane for ships exiting into the Gulf of Oman, separated by a narrow 2-mile wide buffer zone. Each of these directional lanes is only about 2 miles wide. If you were to open a satellite ship tracking app right now, you would not see ships scattered randomly across the strait. You would see hundreds of massive vessels traveling in two perfect parallel single file lines, exactly like a multi-lane elevated highway. To simply steer south and drive outside of these lanes to avoid Iran would be the maritime equivalent of a semi-truck suddenly driving off an overpass to avoid traffic. But why are these specific traffic lanes placed where they are? Why weren't the lanes just drawn further south, closer to Oman, in the first place? This brings us to the most critical geographical factor of the entire region, bathymetry, or the underwater topography of the seabed. When you look at the blue expanse of the ocean on a map, you cannot see the jagged, treacherous mountains hiding just beneath the surface. While the Strait of Hormuz might look spacious from a bird's eye view, the underwater reality is drastically different. The area immediately off the coast of the United Arab Emirates and the northern tip of Oman is a geographical minefield. It is heavily littered with unpredictable shoals, dangerous coral reefs, and massive, jagged, rocky outcrops. Most importantly, the water depth in the southern portion of the strait is alarmingly shallow. This is a massive problem because of the specific types of ships that use this strait. We are talking about very large crude carriers, VLCCs, and massive liquefied natural gas, LNG tankers. These are behemoths of the ocean, often exceeding 330 meters in length. When a supertanker is fully loaded with 2 million barrels of crude oil, the sheer weight of that cargo pushes the hull of the ship incredibly deep into the ocean. The draft of these ships, the distance between the waterline and the absolute bottom of the hull, can easily exceed 25 meters or roughly 80 feet. If a fully loaded VLCC strays from the designated deepwater shipping lanes and attempts to hug the shallower southern coast of the UAE to avoid the Iranian military, the geographical math is merciless. The bottom of the ship will inevitably smash into the rocky seabed. To truly understand why running aground in the Strait of Hormuz is the ultimate nightmare scenario for the global economy, we have to rewind to a geographical disaster that forced the entire world to hold its breath. The 2021 Suez Canal obstruction. In March of 2021, the Ever Given, one of the largest container ships in the world, measuring nearly 400 meters long and carrying roughly 20,000 shipping containers, was navigating the narrow Suez Canal. Caught in a violent desert sandstorm, the ship was blown slightly off course. The bow of the massive vessel slammed directly into the sandy bank of the canal, and the stern swung around, wedging the ship diagonally across the entire waterway. In a matter of seconds, the Ever Given became a 400-meter steel barricade. It completely froze one of the most important maritime routes on Earth. And within days, a massive traffic jam of over 400 ships, including oil tankers, LNG carriers, and dry bulk vessels, piled up at both ends of the canal. Experts estimated that the blockage held up nearly $10 billion worth of global trade every single day. It took almost a week of round-the-clock dredging, moving tens of thousands of tons of sand, and a fleet of heavy tugboats to finally free the vessel without snapping its hull in half. Now, take that exact nightmare scenario and apply it to the Strait of Hormuz. The deep-water shipping lanes here are just as narrow and unforgiving for a supertanker. If a massive oil tanker attempts to evade Iranian forces, wanders into the shallow waters of the south and violently runs aground, it doesn't just block the flow of traffic, it creates an apocalyptic environmental and economic crisis. An oil tanker is exponentially more dangerous than a container ship. A ruptured hull carrying 2 million barrels of crude oil would result in an environmental catastrophe that would make rescue and salvage operations nearly impossible. The deep water lane is the only option, even if it runs right past the enemy. Beyond the physical rocks and the shallow water, there is also a rigid framework of geopolitical law that forces ships to stay on their designated path. The ocean is governed by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. Because the Strait of Hormuz is so incredibly narrow, only 21 miles at its tightest point, there are actually no international waters in the middle of the choke point. The territorial waters of Iran and Oman overlap entirely. To ensure that global trade doesn't collapse, maritime law grants commercial and military vessels the right of transit passage. This principle dictates that ships have the absolute right to pass through the territorial waters of these coastal states, but with a massive caveat: they must travel continuously, expeditiously, and strictly within the designated maritime corridors. Or else a ship cannot simply wander freely through Omani territorial waters on a whim. If a vessel deviates from the internationally recognized shipping lane without authorization, the coastal state has the legal right to intervene, intercept the ship, and force it back onto the route. Therefore, acting on one's own initiative to creatively go around the danger zone via the UAE or Oman is legally unacceptable and highly provocative. But let us play the ultimate hypothetical. Let us assume the water in the south was completely deep, perfectly clear of reefs, and international law didn't exist. If the commercial ships and the US Navy could sail right up against the beaches of Oman, would it actually keep them safe from Iran in the 2026 conflict? Absolutely not. This is where the geography of the map meets the terrifying reality of modern military technology. The Strait of Hormuz is roughly 21 miles wide at its absolute narrowest point. In the context of 21st century warfare, 21 miles is not a geographic buffer, it is point-blank range. From the towering, jagged cliffs of the Iranian coastline, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, can deploy an arsenal of highly advanced asymmetric weaponry. They possess highly sophisticated anti-ship cruise missiles, such as the Noor or the Qatar, that can cover the entire 21-mile distance of the strait in a matter of seconds. Whether a US Navy destroyer or a commercial oil tanker is sailing in the northern lane, the southern lane, or completely hugging the Omani coastline, they are still 100% within the absolute kill zone of Iranian missile batteries hidden deep within the Zagros Mountains. Furthermore, Iran operates massive fleets of heavily armed, high-speed, fast-attack boats that can swarm across the narrow strait before a massive lumbering oil tanker even has time to turn its rudder. There is no geographical safe distance inside a 21-mile choke point. Finally, there is one specific weapon in the Iranian arsenal that completely ignores shipping lanes, ignores bathymetry, and ignores international law: the naval mine. In any conflict scenario in the Persian Gulf, naval mines are the most frequently mentioned and deeply feared tactical reality. They are relatively cheap, brutally simple, and exceptionally effective in narrow straits. Iran doesn't need to engage in a massive, glorious naval battle with the United States to win. They merely need to drop a few dozen contact or acoustic mines into the waters of the strait. The moment a single mine is spotted, or the moment a single ship is struck, the entire geographical waterway must immediately shut down for safety checks. Mine clearing operations at sea are agonizingly slow, incredibly dangerous, and highly complex. And while the US Navy clears the mines, the ultimate deciding factor of global trade kicks in: the insurance guillotine. A modern oil tanker carrying a full payload is an asset worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Shipping companies cannot and will not sail these vessels without comprehensive maritime insurance. If a region is officially designated as an active war zone filled with naval mines and flying missiles, insurance premiums do not just increase, they skyrocket to the point of absolute unprofitability. In highly tense situations, underwriters will simply refuse to provide coverage at all. If a shipping company loses its insurance, it will not gamble a $100 million asset just to deliver oil. The ships will simply drop their anchors outside the strait, and the global energy supply will freeze. When you combine all of these elements, you realize the brilliant, terrifying reality of Iran's geographical position. The map of the Middle East proves that you do not need to possess the most powerful military on earth to hold the world hostage. You simply need to stand in the right place. Iran does not need to control the entire ocean. By simply occupying the northern, mountainous half of a 21-mile-wide geographic bottleneck, they dictate the flow of energy for the entire planet. The shallow seabed topography to the south, the strict laws of international maritime transit, the sheer size of modern supertankers, and the lethal reach of modern anti-ship missiles all force every single ship to comply with the map. So while it looks like there is plenty of blue water to the south, the reality is that the Strait of Hormuz is a rigid, unforgiving hallway. Every single day, thousands of giant ships must march single file down this watery corridor, holding the energy arteries of the planet in their hulls. And when the 2026 war demands it, Iran knows exactly where those ships will be, because in the Strait of Hormuz, the geography ensures that there is absolutely nowhere else to go.